let's talk about the question type matching sentence endings. So this is what this question type will look like on your IELTS exam. The correct answer will be usually a letter, and it will tell you at the very top of the directions, and then the number of questions you have, and it can be any number, 3 to 5 or 6. There could be several of these. But anyway, these are the question numbers you have, and here's what you need to do. So you need to complete a sentence that begins with these words next to the question. And the correct sentence completion will be one of these choices down below. So if you think A is correct for this, then it would make sense, according to the passage, to say vegetative reproduction is a collection of identical organisms that would perish if separated. Okay, actually that is not a correct answer. All right, we'll see that in a minute when we analyze the text a little bit. Just showing you what you would do to complete the question here. Notice that sometimes you may use a letter choice more than once, and the directions will tell you that. Okay, let's take a look at this question and how to prepare for it and some strategies for this type of question. So this question is about your ability to understand the main idea of a sentence. All right, so what you're going to do, as we mentioned before, you're going to select a phrase from a list of choices in that box and complete the sentence accurately based on the passage. The sentence has to make sense, okay? So it has to be accurate according to what you can find in the passage. It also has to work grammatically. Sometimes some of the answer choices will not really make sense grammatically, and that's great. When you find that, you can just cross that answer off for that question and you don't need to consider it for whatever question you're trying to find the answer for. The correct answer, as everything on the IELTS exam, will almost always be a paraphrase of something you find in the passage. A really nice thing about this passage is that the answers will come in order. In other words, you're going to find the answer for number 1 in the passage before the answer for 2 will be presented. So you know when you find an answer that you think is correct, you can mark that on your text and then use that in order to help you find other answers that will come either before or after that answer. So that's part of one of our strategies here. Let's look at several of these. So the most important thing to do in order to answer these questions well is to go back to your passage and scan, looking for what's there in the first part of the sentence. In other words, the words that are next to the question number. You don't want to look for and scan for the answer choices. You don't want to use those, the things in the box, to go do your scanning, because some of them are wrong. And therefore, if you start scanning based on what's in the box, you're going to waste time because you're not going to find correct statements for some of those things. You use the words or the phrases next to the question number and go back and look for information related to those things. That's the best way to go. If you believe that one of the questions will be easier than others to find, start with that one. When you did your scan of the essay at the beginning, so before you started analyzing the question, did you notice one of the answer choices and it's easy for you to go back and find where in the passage that will be? That would be a good reason to choose that as an easy place to start. Remember that answers come in order. So if you do find an answer that you feel really good about, then you know that the other answers will come either before or after that. In other words, if question number 3 is easy for you to find, you know that the questions for numbers 1 and 2 will come before that answer in the text. So that will help you to scan more efficiently. So you can use that answer to scan for other answers that come before or after. If possible, eliminate some choices. So, as we mentioned before, sometimes you can mark a choice off and it just won't make sense because of the grammar. The phrase or words next to the question number just won't make sense with some of the answer choices. That's great. Cross those off. Those are not possible answers for the question you're looking at. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense logically. The words don't work together. The subject of the sentence or the phrase that begins don't make sense with the words that will complete the sentence. So again, you can just cross those off. Okay, now let's practice this. Let's look through some examples and answer a few of these questions. To do this, it's best if you have scanned, or at least if you're familiar from other question types, with the article called Clonal Colonies. If you haven't scanned that yet, go ahead and open that up. The link is at the bottom of this lesson, and you could take your 2 to 4 minutes to scan it quickly like you would for the IELTS exam. Okay, so you've scanned and now you're ready to answer this question. Which one would be easiest to start with? So if we're using our strategy and we're remembering, okay, all the answers come in order, which one would you start with? Well, speaking for myself, I would definitely start with number 1. Because I remember from my scanning that I saw this phrase and I only remember seeing it once, and that was at the top of the essay, right in one of the first paragraphs, right? So then if we're choosing this one, vegetative reproduction, then what we need to do is look down, okay, which answer choice would make sense with vegetative reproduction? Well, what do you do now? My suggestion is to go back to the passage first and read what's the sentences around the phrase vegetative reproduction that you found. And maybe an answer can be quickly discovered just by doing that, okay? So, sure enough, paragraph A is the one place where we see that phrase, vegetative reproduction, where it says, plants frequently reproduce asexually, creating a genetically identical offspring or clones. The term for this type of procreation is vegetative reproduction. Okay, so vegetative reproduction is basically the definition for this process, and then it defines it further, which includes a number of different processes by which various plants multiply. Okay, let's go down here and look at our choices. Now we're going to do this slowly here and take a close look, and maybe for you it would be a much quicker process to find this answer, but let's walk through each one and cross a few out. So A, does this make sense? Vegetative reproduction is a collection of identical organisms that would perish if separated. Is vegetative reproduction an organism? No. Reproduction is a process, right? It's a process. We see that here, all right? We know that. And it's a type of procreation. So it's not an organism at all. We can definitely cross that answer off. B, vegetative reproduction is the underground connection between two clones. Is it a connection between clones? No. Okay. C, vegetative reproduction includes several ways that plants self-replicate. Aha! That looks like a tempting answer. We have processes, types. Okay, these are ways that plants self-replicate. Well, maybe you're not familiar with the word replicate. We have the word self here, and we know that these terms relate to reproducing yourself, cloning, okay, producing an exact copy. This one is very tempting. Let's just mark it as a tempting answer for right now. D, vegetative reproduction is a real phenomenon, but relatively uncommon in the plant world. Okay, now this is tempting too, a phenomenon. That could be a process. like we saw up here at the top. All right, so we'll have to decide between C and D. And how about E? Vegetative reproduction can be cut along with some of its roots. Ooh, no, this makes no logical sense already. This sounds like something that's related to a plant. So I think we need to choose between C and D. All right, which one makes most sense? Is vegetative reproduction a real phenomenon but uncommon in the plant world? Well, no, even just in this one sentence we can see plants frequently reproduce asexually, creating genetically identical offspring or clones. The term for this type of procreation is vegetative reproduction. Aha! I think D is definitely incorrect because the passage tells us the opposite of D. And that's great to know because now I think we can just cancel off D as an answer choice for any of these questions. D is false according to the passage, according to this part right here. C is a good answer here, and D is just incorrect. Let's take a look at number 2, a rhizome. Okay, so now we're going to go a little more quickly through this. If you want to go and pause your video now and try to find the answer, go ahead and do that. Okay, so you've paused your video, and what you should have done is to go back and scan for this word. Go find where the passage discusses rhizomes. And there are a few spots in there. So what we're going to try to do now is again, try to figure it out. Which one makes sense? Remember, you can use any letter more than once, so we can't cross off this one just automatically. But does it make sense? A rhizome includes several ways that plants self-replicate? No, that sounds like a process, so we can definitely cross that one off. Okay, but then let's take a look at the other ones that may make sense. Okay, well, since we've crossed this one off, and we definitely crossed this one off for all answer choices because the passage says something opposite to this, then we're left with A, B, and E. Okay, so E is a very tempting answer because it does discuss these plants being cut and transplanted. Okay, but E is actually not the best answer. B is the best answer, and let's take a look at why. So if you go to paragraph C, you'll find where it discusses a rhizome. Let's look at paragraph C. Within the soil, a root will extend horizontally away from the plant, eventually sending up a new stem that breaks through to an open air distance away and grows separately. A root capable of doing this is called a rhizome, while an individual stem in that system is called a ramette. Okay, so if you read this carefully, and you need to read it carefully, this is a good example of how the IELTS will test your close reading of a sentence. So this one makes sense because what we have is a connection underground between two clones. All right, an underground connection could be a root and is a root in this case. That's better than this answer, even though it does say that rhizomes can be cut. Look what it also says. Can be cut along with some of its roots. A rhizome is a root. So that sentence doesn't make sense, okay? This part makes E a bad choice for rhizome because a rhizome is a kind of root, and it does not make sense that you can cut it along with some of its roots. Okay? Does that make sense? So this answer, even though it's a little more general, is best because a rhizome connects two clones together underneath the ground. That's what it is. It's a root. All right, and the last one, a ramette. Okay, once again, if you want to go search for the answer, scan and look for the answer, go ahead and do that now. It should be getting easier, right? We've already looked at some of the answers to these. We know that the answer for number 3 will come after the answer we just got for number 2, so go ahead and scan for it now. Okay, you've scanned for the answer. Now we're looking at a rammet. Now you may have found that in the passage, rammet is described this way. However, if the connection between two stems, the rhizome, is cut, neither will necessarily die. It is possible to sever one rammet and its most immediate roots from a system, transfer that stalk to a new location, plant it, and have it survive. Aha. Okay, so which one does that remind us of down below? Well, we just saw it, and this was actually the incorrect answer for rhizome because it talks about its roots. A rammet has roots. A rammet is the offshoot that comes out of a rhizome. So, it says here, it is possible to sever one rammet and most of its immediate roots. There it is. And move it to a new location. Transplant means to transfer, to move to a new place. And so E makes the most sense there. Okay, that's the kind of thinking you should do for these sentence completion questions. It's a difficult type of question because you really need to scan and find the answers back in the passage. You have to really be able to think about what the meaning of these sentences are and whether they make sense according to the passage.